as strong as me in Marin County. I rode with the guy.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you.
No more previews. Oh, sorry. Okay, it's 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on time because you can get a little extra credit for adding that one to the other 8 for the term. And let's see, Chris Monsieur is going to send the sign-in sheet around for folks, and I think that's it for logistics. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself, Professor Jennifer Dill from Urban Studies and Planning, also Director of OTREC, and along with Professor Chris Monsieur, we help co-organize this weekly seminar. Welcome, everyone. This is a talk that I have given a couple times before, and I should probably acknowledge, I remembered Professor Sandy Rosenblum from University of Arizona, who first asked me to prepare this talk for a conference on women and transportation that was held over a year ago. And it was a lot of fun to put the talk together, and I've given it another time since, and here I am again, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. And those of you who are new to the seminar in here, we do webcast the seminar, which means people are watching live on the web. When we get to the end, when we have some time for questions, you will need to use the microphones when you ask your questions so that people on the web can hear. They're on the desks. You need to hold the touch button, keep the red light lit while you're asking your question. If you don't have a microphone or if it's not working, Professor Monsieur has the portable mic, and he'll play Phil Donahue and walk around. So without further ado, I'm going to move on. So I'm going to start with explaining my interest behind this topic. And that is the fact that in large U.S. cities today, men far outnumber women in terms of cyclists on the road. And that issue was highlighted in this Scientific American article last fall with the subtitle, "To Boost Urban Bicycling, Figure Out What Women Want." It explained that men outnumber women on bicycles by at least 2 to 1 in U.S. cities, which is in contrast to the best bicycling cities in Europe. That finding suggests that women may actually be an indicator species for the bikeability of a city. And this got me really interested in the history of women and bicycling and what might we learn from the past. So my talk today is going to try to link the past with the present, covering the topics of technology, independence, and that's where the power comes in, health, and that's where the sex comes in, and fashion. My focus is going to be on comparing the heyday of the bicycle in the late 1890s with today, perhaps the dawn of a new heyday of bicycling. So to start our story, we're going to turn first to the bicycle itself, because the evolution of the bicycle plays a key role in this story. So starting in 1817 in Germany, inventors introduced several types of human-powered vehicles with 2 wheels, propelled by feet kicking the ground. There were no pedals, no gears or chains. These vehicles, often referred to as velocipedes, were not easy to balance or steer. Though more popular as a hobby for rich young men, the first ladies' model with a dropped frame to accommodate women's skirts was introduced in 1819 in London. The notion of women riding these contraptions, however, was not universally accepted. British satirists created many comical images of women riding the new machines. In this 1819 print, Robert Cruikshank portrays two buxom women riding men's models with their breasts supported by special bars. The tone of such images suggested that proper ladies would not ride such machines in public. Walk in, take a seat. A new model of velocipede was introduced in France in 1865, which had pedals on the front wheel, though it still lacked brakes and was difficult to mount and dismount. These became popular in the U.S. starting in about 1867, with women riding them in clubs and riding schools in large U.S. cities. Acceptance, however, was still limited. In 1869, a New Haven, Connecticut newspaper reported on an event in a local park. Quote, "A young woman in fancy attire amused the crowd on the velocipede. The only difficulty she experienced was in getting a good start and making a graceful halt." The paper went on to note that the event was too questionable to gain approval from other ladies in the park, and concluded that, quote, "the performance would have looked better if it had come off in a circus ring." In France and Belgium, women rode in velocipede races, as pictured here in an 1868 edition of Le Monde. Though when the American publication Harper's Weekly ran the same story, the illustration was amended to cover the women's legs. The Hippodrome in Paris, a stadium that held up to 15,000 spectators, introduced women's velocipede racing in 1868. Images of women riding velocipedes during this time period often fell into one of two categories. On the one hand, we have strong women who either raced or entertained on the machines, though they were often dressed suggestively in provocative poses, or were otherwise cast at the margins of society, such as this photo of a French entertainer in the 1860s. On the other hand were the satirists, in this case mocking women's ability to control the machine. It was less common to see a typical woman depicted on a velocipede. Interest in velocipedes waned, and the new two-wheeler took over. The British high-wheeler, or ordinary bicycle, was introduced in the U.S. in 1876. It did represent an increase in mobility and accessibility, but mainly for men, given the difficulty of mounting and riding these contraptions. In her review, Ellen Gruber Garvey explains that as long as men were on high-wheelers, they were definitely outside of women's sphere. There was a definite risk of falling off of these high-wheelers, and that possibility made for a good storyline, including one recounted by Garvey appearing in Godey's Lady Book, a magazine, in 1888. The story was called A Turn of the Wheel. In it, a young American man wheels through the French countryside on a high-wheeler. He gets distracted by a young, immobile woman standing in a doorway and takes a header over the handlebars. He then must be brought in and nursed back to health. Of course, he falls in love and marries the young woman. We'll return to the use of bicycles in magazine literature in a bit. A more proper option to the high-wheeler for women was introduced, and that was the tricycle. This print from 1887 shows a woman riding a version of a tricycle, which is typically only used by a few women and older men who wanted the benefits of cycling without the risk of falling off. That all changed with the introduction of the safety bicycle in the 1880s. The key difference is that it had two wheels of the same size, a center-mounted seat, and a chain that drove the rear wheel. The invention of the safety bicycle propelled cycling beyond sport and recreation to the masses, including women. Manufacturers quickly introduced a ladies' version with a drop frame and no crossbar. Views of women riding these bicycles was still mixed, however, though often more positive than earlier. An 1896 issue of Munsey's magazine, a publication read by America's middle class at the time, described the potential of women riding as follows. To men, the bicycle in the beginning was merely a new toy, another machine added to the long list of devices they knew in their work and in their play. To women, it was a steed upon which they rode into a new world. the best gift the 19th century has brought her. The article continued. Hitherto a weak, helpless creature, she can at her own sweet will cover great stretches of country without appreciable fatigue, and all the delights of motion, sun, and air come without any more effort than has been given to dawdling about the streets. The press seemed generally more accepting of ladies riding bicycles as long as they followed proper etiquette and remained in their proper social roles, such as depicted in this illustration of New York's Riverside Drive in 1895. However, fears that women might engage in scorching or speed riding were very common. England's cycling magazine wrote in 1892, quote, "This is a go-ahead age, an age when woman is as characteristically go-ahead as man. But there is a prescribed limit beyond which her modesty and deportment should absolutely forbid her to step. The record-breaking woman cannot be graceful. For when she centers all her attention and energy towards the attainment of speed, she cannot fail to be other than an object of ridicule." And it was not always men who proposed such limits for women on bicycles. Lilias Davidson authored a handbook, Cycling for Ladies, which supported women's cycling and provided much advice on the subject, including that women should know how to fix their own bicycle. However, she also rejected the idea of women racing on bicycles, insisting that it would result in injury and that, quote, "a woman's nervous system suffers 100 times more than a man's from this excitement and tension from the race itself." So, how has technology changed? Fortunately, when it comes to bicycle design, we have progressed beyond the simple drop bar to accommodate skirts. Most major bike manufacturers now offer a women's specific design that is designed to uniquely fit women's bodies. There are custom frame builders that cater to women, including Sweet Pea Bicycles here in Portland, Oregon. Other advancements in technology are allowing both men and women to accommodate more of their travel needs on 2 wheels, or perhaps even 3. Adult tricycles are starting to make a comeback, often marketed to older adults, both women and men alike. But in case you don't want to be low on a tricycle, we also have tall bikes made by and for women. The Irondells are a tall bike gang, described by their founder, Sky Blue, as a group of women who empower each other and have fun riding tall bikes. As described by Jonathan Moss, the goal is to teach women how to build their own tall bikes without the usual male ego-laden testosterone flare-ups that can sometimes creep into other bike building sessions. Here are some excerpts from a poem on their organization's website telling the story of how they started. Once upon a time in the beautiful land of roses, several ladies from the Zubom and Portland bike communities were looking to ride tall bikes with other ladies. "Whatever shall we do?" thought Daisy as she was sewing the final touches on a duvet. "Surely there are other fine, crafty ladies whom desire more than feisty late-night escapades." To the north and the south, other ladies were thinking and dreaming as well. "Someday I would like to take to the streets in a sea of tall bikes, commanded by strong-willed, outspoken ladies. Alas, it is but a dream fueled by these books I read," sighed Aphasia. The poem continues. "I've been wanting to build a tall bike for the last year, and I'm tired of waiting. It'd be nice to work in an environment that wasn't so intimidating or condescending," contemplated Chuckle Touchette. "All this knowledge on bike maintenance and repair, if only I could share it with other women so they would no longer rely on a knight in shining armor," thought Valencia. And hence the first Irondells meeting occurred, and the organization continues. Now note that Valencia's desire to be able to fix her bike echoes that of Lilias Davidson over 100 years earlier. The theme of independence is clear in that Irondells story, and it's prevalent throughout the history of women and bicycles. Susan B. Anthony proclaimed that the bicycle has done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. She explained that, quote, When bicyclists want a bit of special legislation, such as side paths and laws to protect them, or to compel railroads to check bicycles as baggage, the women are likely to be made to see that their petitions would be more likely to be respected by the lawmakers if they had votes, and the men that they are losing a source of strength because so many riders of the machine are women. From such small practical lessons, a seed is sown that may ripen into the demand for full suffrage. This image from a German publication in 1897 makes a connection between the bicycle and this young lady's unconventional independence. He says, "But Miss Elsa, are you so carried away with your women's liberation work that you would never consider engagement?" She replies, "An engagement? Why, heavens no. That's far too conventional for me." And note the bicycles in the background. Bicycle manufacturers definitely saw women as a market for cycling. They needed to convince the public of such, and thus the advertising conveyed the pleasant aspects of bicycling. I'm going to pause for a sec. If the people in the back want to come up and grab a seat, you are more than welcome to. This poster was from 1896. Okay. No, I don't like people standing in the back. The advertising often linked bicycles to nature. Bicycles were a way to provide city dwellers with easy access to the countryside. This natural experience would free the urbanite from such mechanical constraints as railroad schedules. The ads were often designed by artists such as Maxfield Parrish with visual elements that were sophisticated, associating bicycles with glamour and with being up to date. For women, the bicycle offered freer movement into new spheres outside the family and home. Maria E. Ward's 1896 manual, Bicycling for Ladies, hinted at the link between cycling and suffrage, linking riding to autonomy and responsible citizenship. Quote, "Riding the wheel, our own powers are revealed to us. You have conquered a new world, and exultingly you take possession of it. You feel at once the keenest sense of responsibility. You become alert, active, quick-sighted, and keenly alive as well to the rights of others as what is due yourself. To the many who wish to be actively at work in the world, the opportunity has come." Playwright Marguerite Marrington wrote in 1895, "Now and again a complaint arises of the narrowness of woman's sphere. For such disorder of the soul, the sufferer can do no better than to flatten her sphere to a circle, mount it, and take to the road." Conservatives, however, attacked women's bicycling, asserting that it would disrupt social roles by allowing women the freedom of movement beyond taking care of the family. For example, in 1898, the Women's Rescue League concluded that, quote, "Bicycling by young women has helped more than any other media to swell the ranks of reckless girls who finally drift into the standing army of outcast women of the United States." The president of that organization, Charlotte Smith, unsuccessfully tried to convince the New York State Legislature to outlaw cycling by women in 1897. Magazines at the time featured many fiction pieces, which were increasingly being linked to the advertising in the magazines. In the 1890s, bicycle ads made up about 10% of national advertising. So the stories in those magazines were often used to reassure readers that the bicycle would not disrupt social order, that it did not threaten the stability of either the family or parental authority. Many stories followed a simple formula: girl meets boy, they fall in love, and they get married. The bicycle was often used as an instrument to enable that story in an effort to diminish its threat. Ellen Gruber Garvey's 1995 article recounts one story appearing in 1896 titled "Rosalind a Wheel." The story addresses and diffuses the possibility that bicycling might be masculinizing. Although Ethel dresses as a boy to escape home on her bicycle tour, she is spotted by a fellow bicyclist, a socially suitable brother of a girlfriend. Revealing that he has long been interested in her, he insists on seeing her home safe under her father's roof. It closes with Ethel safely back in girls' clothes and her courtship with the right sort of fellow well underway. This was not always the case, however. One story, titled The Unexpected by Kate Chopin, appeared in Vogue magazine in 1895. And note that Vogue was not a magazine that relied on bicycle ads for their revenue. In this story, Dorothea and Randall are supposed to marry. Randall has been quite ill, and they have remained apart for quite some time. When they finally see each other again, her feelings have definitely changed. To quote the story, "She stared at him as one might look upon a curious apparition, which inspired wonder and mistrust rather than fear. This was not the man who had gone away from her, the man she loved and had promised to marry. What hideous transformation had he undergone, or what devilish transformation was she undergoing in contemplating him? The lips with which he had kissed her so hungrily, and with which he was kissing her now, were dry and parched, and his breath was feverish and tainted. At the sight and the touch of him, something within her seemed to be shuddering, shrinking, shriveling together, losing all semblance of what had been. She felt as if it was her heart, but it was only her love." The story continues with Randall urging Dorothea to marry him at once before he goes off to the south to recover. She watches him leave from the window above. The story continues. 15 minutes later, Dorothea had changed her house gown, had mounted her wheel, and was fleeing as if death himself pursued her. She sped along the familiar roadway, seemingly borne on by some force other than mechanical, some unwanted energy, a stubborn impulse that lighted her eyes, set her cheeks aflame, bent her supple body to one purpose, that was swiftest flight. How far and how long did she go? She did not know. She did not care. Every muscle, nerve, fiber abandoned itself to the delicious sensation of rest that overtook and crept tingling through the whole length of her body. She had never spoken a word after bidding him goodbye, but now she seemed disposed to make confidants of the tremulous leaves or the crawling and hopping insects or the big sky into which she was staring. "Never," she whispered, "not for all his thousands. Never, never, not for millions." That desire to abandon the conventional woman's role with the help of a bicycle is illustrated in a remarkable story of Annie Londonberry. In June 25, 1894, Annie Cohen-Kopchowski stood before a crowd of 500 friends, family, suffragists, and curious onlookers at the Massachusetts State House and announced her intent to ride her bicycle around the world. The trip was reportedly set in motion by a novel, high-stakes wager made by two wealthy clubmen in Boston. Annie's challenge was not only to circle the globe by bicycle in 15 months, but also to earn $5,000 while she did so. What makes this story even more remarkable is that Annie was a 23-year-old Jewish immigrant who, when she pedaled out of Boston, left her husband and 3 small children behind. Yet despite having never ridden a bicycle before, Annie proved remarkably well equipped for the journey. Not only did she abandon, temporarily, her role of wife and mother, but for most of the journey she rode a man's bicycle attired in a man's riding suit. She earned her way selling photographs of herself, appearing as an attraction in stores, and by turning herself into a mobile billboard, renting space on her body and her bicycle to advertisers eager to benefit from this colorful spectacle on wheels. One such sponsor was Londonderry Lithia Springs Water Company. That company paid Annie to hang an advertising placard on her bike and to assume the Londonderry name. According to her biography by Peter Zutlin, she was resourceful, cunning, and willful, a master of public relations, a consummate self-promoter, and a skillful creator of her own myth. She staged this photograph of herself near San Francisco in 1895 and used it to illustrate her lectures she gave in order to raise money. Her lectures were filled with fantastic tales of such high adventure. Annie did arrive back in Boston, circling the globe 18 months after she started her journey. A more modern role model, perhaps, is Jackie Phelan, a pioneer in mountain bike racing, and here's a piece of her story.
So in 1981, the Olympics decided to allow women's road racing, but there were no women as strong as me in Marin County. I rode with the guys, but the local roadie men hated me for being so strong and undroppable. They even went to pains to exclude me by saying their rides were invitation only. In road racing, even the women riders begged me to consider changing sports. So I got into mountain bike racing where the attitude was, the more the merrier. I won all the races I entered. I was national champion for 3 years, and I'd found my tribe, which was great, but there were precious few women. That needed to change.
Jackie was something of a legend. I wrote for City Sports magazine, which covered the sport, and there were stories in City Sports about her.
I didn't have competition, but in those days we all raced together, so I was competing quite strenuously with certain guys that really didn't want me to beat them in that race. So it was great. I had a lot of unfair advantages. I was riding a bike that was 20 years ahead of its time. It's sort of like my lover. I definitely have slept with it when I'm camping, and it's actually a manifestation of Charlie's handiwork, my husband, who made it this beautiful machine just for me.
Jackie is a package. Yeah, she's a one of a kind. And she's really, really good at riding bikes and can kick anyone's butt, even half their age.
Almost every mountain biker I run into, especially women mountain bikers, they seem to know Jackie or took a class from her once or really developed their enjoyment of mountain biking through her.
She brought the sport into a place where women could actually access it.
So Wombats was this funny name that I made up, Women's Mountain Bike MT Society. If you put a bunch of women together and they go out and have a good time on a bike, it's going to be fun and social, because that's what women really like. It's not rigorous, testosterone-rich. I think it's almost a myth that it's a men's sport. I just disagree with their essential belief that it's dangerous, it's not easy, and you have to look a certain way, and you have to dress a certain way, and you have to buy new equipment all the time. That's baloney. Nowadays, it's kind of a challenge, you know, 53-year-old woman trying to convince people that she's so great. But nobody's allowed to say I've retired, because I am not retired. I am, in my own head, a superhero, an action hero for women. Is the world ready for a 53-year-old supermodel? I think so.
She thinks outside the box. She likes the idea of dessert first.
I'm a two-wheeled person in a four-wheel world. You know, on a bike, things are very peaceful. Every hour on the bike is 1 hour spent in perfect balance. That's a very small revolution right there. And that's something I share with everybody that rides. They can tell I love being on my bike. All these things that make this a totally practical personal transportation vehicle, as well as, in my opinion, personal transformation. Turned me from a young, angry young woman to a fairly grounded, pretty content old bat. It is the one thing between me and madness.
So that was just one clip from a movie. It's available on YouTube if you want to see more. So this theme of independence and strength is also illustrated today through Portland's own Sprockettes, an all-female synchronized mini bike dance troupe. In addition to entertaining and advocating bicycle riding, they see it as their mission to, quote, empower and inspire people to live out their crazy and wildest dreams, therefore embracing the badassosity of life and living their full potential. Promote positive self-image for all body types, offering an alternative to the dangerous monoculture of what the ideal body type is, and promote female positive perspective that celebrates women's empowerment. Encourage exercise, movement, health, and pro-physical lifestyle, and organize and operate our dance troupe in a collective fashion. Here's one clip from one of their shows illustrating the group's passion for dancing, bicycles, do-it-yourself ideology, and striving to promote a healthy body image.
Sexy on the inside. Oh yes, you started, cause that body is unique in its way. It don't matter if you're fatter, if your skin ain't been A. People staring, always caring, do I look like I should? Never feeling what is real, I think that just ain't no good. Because unique, you know it, you sexy naughty, you show it. Unique, you know it. You sexy, you show it.
So that link that the Sprockettes make to health, and this health and bicycling link has really gained a lot of attention with our nation's obesity epidemic, but it's not new. However, in the early days of the bicycle, the discussion was clearly not focused on what types of infrastructure or programs might get more people bicycling and more physically active and healthy, as evidenced by this quote. Around the turn of the century, several of the attacks on the opportunity provided women by the bicycle took on a sexual form. The fear of the potential of women's riding was articulated through medical discourse that attacked bicycling as both masculinizing and a threat to sexual purity. Nearly every book and many articles on bicycling at the time addressed the topic of the effect of cycling on health. Both sides used medical arguments, and as it turns out, both had a common interest of keeping women in traditional roles. Those opposed to cycling argued that it was dangerous for women to expend so much of their strength on physical activity. The other line of the argument focused on sexual health and the supposed problematic effects of the bicycle saddles. As a result of the angle of the saddle, quote, the bicycle teaches masturbation in girls, according to E.D. Page as printed in the Brooklyn Medical Journal in 1897. The Journal of Obstetrics in 1895 published an article by R.L. Dickinson with the following passage. The saddle can be tilted in every bicycle as desired. In this way, a girl could, by carrying the front peak or pommel high, or by relaxing the stretched leather in order to let it form a deep hammock-like concavity, which would fit itself snugly over the entire vulva and reach up in front, bring about constant friction over the clitoris and labia. This pressure would be much increased by stopping forward, and the warmth generated from vigorous exercise might further increase the feeling. Another physician complained in the Georgia Journal of Medicine and Surgery in 1899 that, quote, if a saddle is properly adjusted for slow riding, in an unusual effort at speed or hill climbing, the body is thrown forward, causing the clothing to press against the clitoris, thereby eliciting and arousing feelings hitherto unknown and unrealized by the young maiden. The result would be a painful and debilitating granular erosion or polypoid growth, according to that journal. Medical books warned that the signs that girls, quote, are addicted to such a vice are only too plain to the physician, and that the habit of masturbation left its marks upon the face so that those who are wise may know what the girl is doing. Thus, bicycle advertisements at the time might show men in a variety of positions, but women were only shown seated upright. The riding posture could also be enforced by the design of the bicycle itself, having the handlebars several inches higher for women. Another product was a modified saddle, which eliminated the point of contact with the genitals. The crotchless style seats circumvent the possibility of saddle masturbation. One ad delicately explains that it, quote, is especially desirable for ladies, for it holds the rider like a chair, the entire weight being supported by the bones of the pelvis, which alone touch the saddle. Proponents of women's cycling also used medical arguments, often linked to the traditional role of women as mothers. Bicycling was commonly said to restore the health of women, whose invalidism made them unfit for not only musicmanship, but for motherhood. It did so in part by strengthening the uterus. And you can see up here, there's a complaint about, is your wife an invalid? Are you constantly paying doctor bills? You know, if so, buy her a bike. Frances Willard exulted that the physical development of humanity's mother half would be wonderfully advanced by the universal introduction of the bicycle. Advertisers, as you can see on the right, often made a direct link between motherhood and riding. This theme was supported by an anxiety at the time that white, non-immigrant, middle-class women were having far too few babies. So at this point, it would be really simple for me to try to make a link to today by pointing to Portland's growing interest in bike porn, Or I could discuss today's academic research linking bicycling and health, and we've done that before in this seminar. But instead, I'm going to take a more serious route. And unfortunately, links between bicycles and women's sexuality in some cultures today has not progressed as far as one would hope. In 2008, the Times of London described a program designed to teach Muslim women to ride bikes and its many positive benefits. Alima, 19, is the coordinator of the cycling group. She told her story. Quote, "My parents never said, 'You can't have a bike.' I never asked them. I once rode my cousin's bike in Sheffield, and I loved it. I rode for 3 hours nonstop. I didn't want to get off." According to the Times, she says that the best thing about riding a bike is freedom. The founder of the program pointed out that there's nothing in the Quran to say that women shouldn't ride bikes. Despite this, various postings on Muslim websites debate the point, and the cultural barriers are strong. Hence the response from this male observer, saying women should not be riding bikes. They are stimulating themselves. If they want to stimulate themselves, they should get a man. Fears that young girls would lose their virginity by riding a bicycle are not uncommon in Muslim society. Saudi clerics deemed bicycles the horse of Satan in the 1960s, and the Saudi Arabian ban on women riding bicycles was only lifted last year. In the 1860s, Western women were still largely second-class citizens, confined to their home or the factory. Conventional garb, tight corsets, long dresses, hats, and gloves restricted their bodies and discouraged recreational exercise, including bicycling. As mentioned earlier, cycling and the suffragists went hand in hand. Changing cycling attire was a critical part of the greater struggle for sexual equality and even the right to vote. Susan B. Anthony in 1895 was quoted, "Why, pray tell me, hasn't a woman as much right to dress to suit herself as a man? The stand she is taking in the matter of dress is no small indication that she has realized that she has an equal right with a man to control her own movements." Elizabeth Cady Stanton made the link to cycling explicitly. Quote, "Men found that flying coattails were ungainly and that baggy trousers were in the way when cycling, so they changed their dress to suit themselves, and we didn't interfere. They had taken in every reef and sail and appear in skin-tight garments. We did not bother our heads about their cycling clothes, and why should they meddle with what we want to wear? We ask nothing more of them than did the devils in Scripture, let us alone." Stanton felt that women wearing regular dresses while cycling appeared unnatural, like a churn on casters, a pyramid in shape from waist downwards. The rise in popularity of the safety bicycle among women provided an opportunity to reform women's dress several decades after Amelia Bloomer first promoted bloomers, though with little success back in the 1850s. Bloomers provoked wrath in conservatives and delight in women cyclists, and the garment was to become the centerpiece of the rational dress movement that sprung up at the end of the 19th century. The bloomer had its enemies, however. The Mississippi Valley Medical Congress in 1895 endorsed cycling as healthful exercise for men and women, but derided bloomers as something outrageous and unanimously declared the garment to be an abomination and the cause of lowering their wearers in the eye of spectators. In 1895, the police in Victoria, British Columbia, decreed that bloomers are not suitable for ladies' streetwear, even when worn as a bicycling costume. When Miss Ethel Delmont wore them while riding her bicycle, the press reported that, quote, "the sensation could not have been greater had she been Lady Godiva herself. Stunned townspeople came forth to gaze. The police, while at first petrified with amazement, issued her a stern warning." Mrs. Angeline Allen of Newark, New Jersey, appeared on her safety bicycle wearing a natty uniform as near like that worn by men as possible. Her lower limbs were all but exposed, covered only by knee-high leggings. For many, even in the bicycling community, that was simply going too far. The American Athlete denounced Mrs. Allen's masculine attire, insisting on a continuance of chastity. It advised wheel women to, quote, abstain from anything that will attract censure. Here she is on the cover of the National Police Gazette in 1893. The caption, "She wore trousers." The article branded her as eccentric, and it recounted how her costume had shocked the good people of society. Some women riders at the time, while supportive of women's bicycling, advised against attracting too much attention. Fanny Erskine, in her handbook, Lady Cycling, supported wearing knickerbockers, but advised that cycling women should avoid, quote, ridiculous blouses and flower garden hats, for these are unmitigatedly absurd. Lilias Davidson wrote, the desire of a gentlewoman will be to avoid public notice by her dress in the saddle as out of it. Her advice continued, all bright colors are out of place, all flying ribbons, lace, and artificial flowers, all feathers and ornaments beyond a simple brooch. So bloomers and knickerbockers experienced their heyday in the U.S. from about 1895 to 1898. While they faded away, they did really help pave the way for further dress reform, including shorter skirts and eventually trousers. So what about today? As you might expect, we have progressed, but not universally. In Iran, women are banned from riding bikes and in some parks and outdoor areas, with officials calling the activity immoral and against Islamic dress codes. Similarly, North Korea's Kim Jong-il banned women from wearing pants and riding bicycles. When a reporter asked a North Korean woman living in Seoul what she would ask Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to tell the North Korean leader, she responded, quote, I would like her to tell him to allow North Korean women to wear pants and ride bicycles. But aren't there more pressing problems than that, the reporter asked. Yes, but it's a matter of livelihood, she replied, adding, for women to work at markets, they have to travel every day. Bicycles are usually the only means of transportation. Without them, they can't make a living. And when you ride bicycles long distances, skirts are very inconvenient. On a more positive note, there are a growing number of non-governmental organizations that are using bicycles as a form of empowerment and tool for economic development among women in developing countries. Closer to home, conflict arose in a Hasidic community in New York. Hasidic leaders wanted the city to eliminate bike lanes because of the women riding through wearing short skirts in conflict with their dress code. On a more positive note, there's a burgeoning, more common today in developed countries, is a celebration of style on the bike. In a way, being stylish on a bicycle is a sign that cycling is normal or mainstream. Copenhagen's Cycle Chic began its blog life back in 2007 when journalist and photographer Michael Colville Anderson decided to put a growing number of photos about Copenhagen's bicycle culture into one place on the internet. This is the original photo from 2007 that inspired the blog. He started out by calling it a social documentary in high heels, highlighting the stylish, street-smart Copenhagen women. He explains that the feedback about these photos was positive, and there was clearly a growing interest in seeing how Copenhageners have demystified the bicycle and use it without any form of bicycle gear. The number of blogs and websites inspired by Cycle Chic has grown explosively since. There's even a burgeoning fashion industry around bicycling, as evidenced by this designer and clothing manufacturer in Portland, Oregon, trying to develop clothing that's functional for women on the bicycle, but also stylish. And we make it complete by having runway fashion shows for bicycle attire. Mia Burke has some great stories in her book, Joyride, about the role of fashion in encouraging women to ride. And personally, as a researcher studying how to get more women to ride, I am curious what the effect of having more women dress fashionably riding bicycles would have on encouraging women to bicycle. That notion, however, is not new. Back in 1893, Lilias Davidson, though warning against the artificial flowers and lace, explained that, quote, Every woman should look upon herself as, in a certain measure, an advocate, so to speak, of the pastime among the member of her own sex. Upon her it will largely depend whether such women as see her a wheel will desire to emulate her example or shun her as a warning against imitation. Every cycling woman who appears in public looking neat, trim, and charming present to the public an attractive advertisement. She makes other women want to follow her example and recommends it in the eye of all beholders. And while she urged women to seek comfort, ease, and safety, it was perfectly possible for a lady to look graceful, elegant, and womanly in the saddle. Davidson continues, "It is the duty of every woman to add to the beauty of the world in her own person, not to take from it. The woman who cannot cycle without making a guy of herself had better never cycle at all." So I think Miss Davidson would approve of Portland's Pretty Dress Ride that's happened every year for the past few years. Some pictures from that, though perhaps she wouldn't approve entirely. And heaven forbid she would come across the naked bike ride in Portland that I am sure she would not approve of. So I'll conclude the talk today with this quote from Susan B. Anthony. "The moment she takes her seat, a woman knows she can't get into harm while she is on her bicycle, and away she goes, the picture of free, untrammeled womanhood. The bicycle also teaches practical dress reform, gives women fresh air and exercise, and help to make them equal with men in work and pleasure. And anything that does that has my good word." So I've left some key sources up there, and we have a few minutes left for questions. And I'm going to I'm also monitoring our email questions at the same time. But open up questions or comments. We have one up here, and don't forget to use the microphone.
My question to you, Professor Dill, is your narration indicates that you are a novelist or an expert narrator and has the ability to research is very superb. So can you explain how you achieved all these qualities in you?
Wow, very flattering. I'm definitely not a novelist. I have to give credit, actually it's good that I've left these up here. There's a lot of people who have written on this topic and written some great things, and those are some of the better ones that I found. And basically what I did, and this was something I worked on during my sabbatical, so those are always good, but just gleaned from a lot of different sources and pieced the things together. And since I've given the talk a couple times, also I keep getting suggestions from other people of examples, and so it's just gleaning. I have no real original research. It's all gleaned from other sources. So.
And the second question is, are you a biker?
Am I a biker? Yes, I do bicycle. Though, and I am one of those women, I don't want to have to change clothes. I want to wear regular clothes. I want to have an easy bike. Yeah, right here. Oh, the microphone isn't working, so Chris will come up.
Oh, thanks. I actually thank you for the really interesting presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought I'd hijack the question time to let people know that there is a new organization in Portland called the Portland Society. It's an organization of it's basically a business alliance for women who are passionate about bicycling. We meet every month. It's a membership organization. There's a scholarship fund. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and it's really super empowering, and there's a lot of really amazing women doing work in the bicycle world in Portland or outside the bicycle world, but who love bicycling. So anyway, portlandsociety.org. If anyone's interested, it's open to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. I see one in the back. Does your microphone? Nope. Okay.
So I have a question about relating to the type of bicycle, because you mentioned that the safety bicycle was really helped women along for biking. When I visited Copenhagen, and they have like a very standard bicycle, looks like the safety bicycle, and that's seems like the standard issue. So what I'm wondering is, do you think there's a relation between like an easy bicycle to ride or seemingly easy and like prevalent, large numbers of women biking?
You know, I do, though I say that just based mainly on anecdotal evidence, and it is something I'd like to do more research on. And the bike manufacturers in the U.S., or I should say the bike manufacturers in terms of what they market and sell in the U.S., in recent years have done a much better job of promoting sort of the commuter style, Dutch style, whatever you want to call it, bicycle that's upright, that's simple. You know, there's other technology, which like I have on my bike, the Shimano internal gears, things that make it simpler, cleaner, better for wearing regular clothes, not having to change. You ride at a slower pace, you don't get as sweaty, etc. And so I think the bike manufacturers are starting to see that. But then also on the flip side, when you go to cities in Europe, you also see men riding those bicycles. So that drop frame is handy for everyone, not just women wearing a dress, though there seems to be maybe a mental barrier in the U.S. to getting away from that for men. So, but yeah, I think the bike technology itself is important, but there hasn't been much research on it with respect to women. Let's see, how about here, and then we'll here, and then back there.
If there was one thing that you could point to that manufacturers could do to help promote more cycling among women, what do you think that would be?
Oh.
I'm just asking because you seem to have much further breadth of information than I do.
Well, on the bicycle itself,
I mean, at this point, cycling bicycle companies also make the accessories for bicycling, right?
Yeah, the helmet is a barrier for a lot of women, and though I haven't seen good data about how much of a barrier it is for women, but I think it's more of a barrier for women than for men in terms of cycling. And there's different ways to address that. There is different types of helmet. There's one that I'm guessing maybe a lot of people have seen because it's gotten around the web, this sort of collar thing that inflates. It's almost like an airbag that people have come up with. Though on the other hand, if you have a really safe environment for cycling, maybe you don't need the helmet as much. And when you go to places like Copenhagen, it's rare that someone's wearing a helmet. So there's sort of two ways to go with that. I think a lot of the technology is out there. I just don't think it's perhaps marketed. When I went shopping for my bike a few years ago and I wanted the Dutch-style bike, it was hard to find. It's a little easier now, but it's still not really easy, or sometimes it's expensive. So, see here, and then back to Arlie, and then we'll go over here.
So I know Peabot has been doing bicycle counts, and as part of that, they record the gender of the users, determine what percentage of women are riding. Do you know how that compares to historical levels?
Oh, historical meaning like 100 years ago, maybe, or?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Not really, because the one thing is it's really hard to find data in the past about bicycling. I've seen numbers of sort of total number of women, but nothing in terms of percent share. Those numbers at the city of Portland, their counts when they've been tracking gender over a short time period, it's improving in terms of women are a greater percentage of riders, or it's been growing. But no, that's one thing I haven't been able to find are good numbers in the past. Let's see. Arlie, you had your hand up earlier, and then I'm going here and then back there.
I don't think it's working. Okay, so your last quotation, Susan B. Anthony, there was something about how a woman cannot be harmed when she's on her bicycle, and it was more of a metaphorical thing, I think, but it made me think about safety. And while it's not a specific issue to women, of course, have you encountered just different attitudes or perceptions between women and men?
Oh yeah,
on safety?
good question. Yes. I mean, there's a fair amount of evidence out there that women are more risk averse, just in general, but also on bicycles. And I've found that in my research, but other people like Jan Gerard in Australia have found that. And it does affect the types of facilities that women prefer versus men. And again, obviously I'm generalizing here, there are exceptions, but the data that we collected a couple years ago in Portland, where we tracked where cyclists rode, definitely found women were a bit more likely to go out of their way to use things like separated paths and bike boulevards where they were more separated from traffic. And there's been other studies that have found that as well. And so that's, I mean, I do believe that if we're going to increase cycling significantly, you definitely have to get more women riding, you have to get more older adults riding, you have to get a lot more different people riding. And the type of facility we need to be thinking about more than just a striped bike lane. So for a lot of women, that's not going to do it. Especially people who haven't cycled before or haven't cycled since they were a kid. You had your hand up, and then I'm going to the back.
As a woman who rides her bike frequently in a skirt and in heels, I find myself a de facto advocate for women cycling in the city. And a frequent question I get by men and women is, how did you get here by bike in that skirt? And it's not always easy, though you find skirts that are easier to ride in than others. But this is my chance to plead to all of you, designers and not designers, people who know people, that if you can come up with a way to retrofit the American bicycle, which is typically like a road bike, or a mountain bike, go for it. A way to retrofit a bike so that the rear brake doesn't munch the skirt, then you will be a rich woman or a rich man. And you can email me when you figure it out.
So there, maybe that's part of your answer to your question about the technology. Yeah. Let's see, there's a question back there.
The microphone even works.
Excellent.
I'm interested in the barriers that the role of child carer poses to women who ride bicycles or to women riding bicycles. And you talked briefly about, in the 1890s, promotion of cycling as strengthening the woman's uterus and being good for making women better mothers. But I'm curious if you came across anything about women riding with children, either on their bikes or with children on their own bikes, in the 1890s context.
That's a good question. No, I didn't come across much of that. But your question is really important because women today, in terms of travel, not just travel in general, women are far more likely to be carting the kids around or now carting the older parents around. And despite sort of some changes in gender roles, still the numbers show that women are more likely to be chauffeuring people in daily household activity. And so, I mean, I think that's where it comes in with the bikes, and you're seeing these more in Portland, the bikes that accommodate kids on the bike. And I showed a few pictures of those. And, you know, it works for both men and women, obviously, but that's one way of addressing this. I think also, back to the technology question, one thing I haven't mentioned is e-bikes, so electric assist bikes, particularly maybe when combined with these more cargo-style bikes, are potentially part of the solution to addressing all of women's travel needs. So, but it, yeah, and I'll have to be on the lookout to see back 100 years ago if there was much about transporting kids with women on bikes. Yeah. There is a question on the web from Drew. So modern-day women's bicycle groups such as the Sprockettes and the Irondales unquestionably celebrate the bicycle and feminism. However, these groups also present themselves as alternative or fringe organizations. How do you feel this image affects the average woman's decision to use a bicycle for transportation?
I don't know what the hell happened,
I mean, I think that's a really good point. And I think I'm not exactly sure. You know, I think it may open up minds, but I also think it gets back to sort of the point that you made and I made earlier. I do believe that if women just see more everyday women who look like them riding bicycles, and it's not just guys in Lycra. You know, the same arguments can be made for men as well. But if you see people like yourself doing something, it's going to open your mind a bit more. And again, I would encourage you, if you haven't picked up a copy yet of Mia Burke's book, Joyride, she talks about this in one of her chapters and has some great stories and examples of that. But yeah, I think the image, I think it is a key part of all of this. And more groups like the one that you mentioned, the Portland Society, that are, you know, looking at the business aspects of this, which is a growing thing in the Portland area. All of those are going to help. So we are at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today in this gym.